What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It is Matty Peverell here for another episode of Steelers Touchdown Underboys. I've got an honorary Touchdown Underboy in Shannon White joining the show today, which is awesome as usual. We had you last week. We're excited to have you this week. Got lots of comments, messages from our listeners about having you on the show and all your great insights. Very fun to get that. I've got a few people that listen that tell me in Australia that they call you. You've got the cowboy on when Shannon's on, so here you go. if that works with West Virginia and that's a thing you want to own, but yeah, they call you the Steelers cowboy.
Okay, I like it.
Awesome. Well, look, obviously, we talked a little bit about last week and the dog days of summer and that sort of thing, and it's July 4th weekend too, so there's probably a lot of people that are going to see this a day or two late. So there's not any breaking news in terms of this podcast or YouTube show, but what I did really think was quite interesting is coming up into training camp. And if anyone's got an opinion about who needs to show out, who needs to show some improvement, who we'd probably like to tell to get stuffed, and get out of the team, it's probably you in what we're looking for. And just with all the great insights and schematics that you bring to the fore. So that's what I thought we'd do the topic of today's show around. I don't know. Where would you like to start before I hit you with the questions? Would you want to go the offense or the defense?
It's whichever. We can start offense.
All right. So I read the Athletics Q&A this week with Mark Matty, and someone asked a question about a whole heap of over and unders, and they had an over and under for Dan Moore Jr. of 4 games, right? And it's interesting because when you look at the Steelers' opponents and who they face through the first 4 games, it is going to be a tough set of circumstances for any sort of tackle, let alone a rookie tackle in Broderick Jones. We talked a lot about Broderick Jones, and he talked about his size and athleticism. And the thing I've noticed about him already is he looks like my dad's 6'5" in pounds, about like 280, whatever. I know what big looks like. He looks a lot bigger than that. And they're the same, in Broderick Jones is 6'4", and I think he's like 310, 320. Obviously, there's a bit more weight there, but Broderick Jones looks like a big guy at 6'4". But let's start there with the over and under. In terms of Dan Moore, Broderick Jones, do you think that's right for Dan Moore? Do you actually think Broderick Jones will surprise? And how will training camp fit into deciding what this might look like in terms of who starts and how many games Dan Moore versus Broderick Jones play at left tackle?
Well, we know that Mike Tomlin prefers to not start rookies. Last year, I thought that, all things being equal, and all 3 quarterbacks played well at times in the preseason. And based on what we heard coming out of training camp, they all look good. But I thought that if it was even, I would have started Kenny Pickett because he was the future. He's the first-round draft pick. And he was doing a lot of what he was doing with the third-string guys. He didn't get practice reps with the first-string guys, and they really never give him any.
No.
So, therefore, they couldn't start him out. I didn't like how they handled that. And that was really Mike Tomlin's first experience of going to preseason without being Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
So, I don't think they necessarily handled it correctly, but they did have a tough early schedule, and we know they wanted to wait to bring Kenny in. Well, this is a little different. The first few games is kind of a murderer's row of pass rushers, and they don't want to throw Broderick Jones out there. So I know that probably in Mike Tomlin's mind right now, at this point in the offseason, he's like, well, we'll start Dan Moore Jr.
Yeah.
Let Broderick Jones get some experience, get accustomed to game day and the new atmosphere and the intensity, and then maybe bring him in there at some point after, again, maybe 4 to 8 games into the season. But I think Broderick Jones is such a talented prospect. If he goes into training camp and in the early part of the preseason and he just plays lights out, he might just be too good to keep on the sidelines. I actually think he is good enough that he could actually start the season, even though right now that's something I do not think Mike Tomlin wants.
So if that's the case, then, and welcome Joe Devil and Jeremiah Yoda to the live chat. If that's the case, how much preseason football do you expect Broderick Jones to play, and will he balanced in snaps with the ones with Dan Moore Jr., or do you expect him to take more snaps?
I think we're going to see a good bit of Broderick Jones, because I think we're going to see Okorafor and Moore playing, and Moore also getting some reps on that right side.
He predicted my follow-up question to whatever you said.
Yeah. I do think we'll see that, because whoever doesn't win one of the starting positions is going to be a high-level swing tackle. And we know that Okorafor has struggled on the left side.
Oh, yeah.
In the past. So if something was to happen, they would say, well, we'll just move to, if say Dan Moore wins the right tackle position and then Jones has an injury, they would probably move Moore back to the left and leave Okorafor on the right, because in the past he's always been more effective on the right side.
And do you think, because I like talking about this sometimes, because people go, oh, everyone hated the Okorafor contract, and then you sat there and you heard the terms, and actually it wasn't that bad. Okorafor, I said this I did a show on Monday, actually, when we went through the Mad Monday show. I called it the dollars and cents of the Steelers roster. And you look at Okorafor, he's actually quite cheap to move next year, whether it is a trade or a cut. It's only a $3 million dead cap hit. So I said on that show on Monday, like Monday for the US, I was like, it's actually a make or break year for Okorafor. Like, this is a really important year, and it's quite interesting that they've brought in Broderick Jones, which they needed to get that left side right and get a bookend tackle on a rookie deal to support Kenny Pickett through his rookie deal. Like, just smart business there, right? It's a pillar. It's a pillar of your team. But Okorafor's in with a definitely in with a challenge. Like, he's going to have to perform, and it's great for the Steelers, because then it helps your overall tackle play. But yeah, Dan Moore's got to fight for a job. So it's quite. I think there's definitely a, to fit in with our title, there's definitely a training camp tussle at tackle that's gonna be going on. We talked a lot about Siamalu last week. It's so funny the difference the way you guys say it versus we say it, and then it's so funny the way some Americans pronounce the Islander names, and then we have a lot of Islanders, and we go to Pacific Islanders, and went to school a lot of them, and some of the pronunciations very different with everyone. What's up, Claude, in the live chat? But we talked a lot about Siamalu last week. Obviously, there's a lot of the discussion around the depth at guard, guys like Nate Herbig, guys like we talked a lot about Spencer Anderson last week. There's Dotson, where there's Green fit into the mix. We talked about McCollum. So we know Daniels is on one side and Siamalu is starting on the other. Like that's what it is. But there's got to be a lot of battle on the back end, kind of, if for want of a better term, behind that sort of starting four or five guys. If you factor in the tackles we just talked about too. Who is your most likely candidate to surprise in making the team and showing out, and who's your candidate who you think is going to surprise people by like not showing out and out the door?
Well, I think that Nate Herbig is going to surprise people from the fact that I think he's going to be the backup center too. I think he's going to be able to back up all three interior positions, and that's how they're going to look at him. So I expect him to get quite a bit of reps in training camp and preseason at center. He does not have an extensive background of experience at
snaps.
center.
Yeah, 55 NFL snaps.
Exactly. Yeah. He doesn't have extensive background, but I believe he's more than capable of being a solid backup center and even a starter if need be for an extended period of time if something was to happen to Cole. I think wouldn't move.
Actually, I just pause that though. You wouldn't move Daniels inside, who's played more center, and move Herbig to right guard? I
don't think you want to mess with your two best offensive linemen. Yeah. I think they want Daniels there. They want Siamalu there and leave them alone. So that's why I think that they have a lot of faith in Cole. I do as well. I know you do. But have Nate Herbig be that backup, and he can come in and you can still stay at a high level. If anything, Herbig is more of a power player.
Yeah.
He's not as mobile and as fundamentally sound as Cole is, but Herbig will come in and that running game won't miss a beat. And he is very solid in pass protection because you don't bull rush Herbig. Herbig is a very powerful man. So then we have Dotson, who is, could be a starter if he isn't traded. He could be a starter for a lot of teams. So he would be a really quality depth with experience in the Steelers system. So that's very valuable. So I don't see them trading him unless they get a really good deal.
Mm.
Then I do not see Green making this squad.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of faith when Green did not want to learn the center position because that's the only position he's capable of playing.
Correct.
And we know how much game study, and technique, and there's so much to learn, and the ability to communicate. And it's such a cerebral position, and he doesn't seem that he has that desire and work ethic to learn it. So if he makes the team, it would shock me.
I mean, I haven't slotted it on the practice squad. If he passes waivers, I can't, I see them doing that. But yeah, that's right. I think that's a funny one in terms of it would shock you if he's not there. It's funny when you talk about Cole, and I was thinking about it after our conversation last week. If the Steelers go on and win at least one playoff game, Cole to me will be the unsung hero of this Steelers offense, without a doubt. Everyone will focus on the wide receivers and Kenny Pickett and Najee Harris and Freiermuth and everyone else. But to me, it's Cole because and Pouncey was fantastic, but in the last couple of years there, and as he was getting later in his career, it was waning him off. And good centers are very, very expensive. And there's very few of them as well. It's one of those positions. There are very few of them, especially centers that can be good year in, year out. So I think that it's definitely interesting that we touched on that point of view. All right, then. From the wide receiver, I think the tight end room's fairly locked down. But from the wide, and we talked a little about running backs, and Mark and I talk about running backs a lot. So I want to talk about the wide receiver room. In terms of wide receivers, you've probably got your top three locked in, and Pickens, Johnson, Robinson. What camp tussle are you looking forward to with the rest of the guys? Because we talked a lot about this last week, and I was thinking just how that shapes up for training camp. Yeah, who excites you? Who's someone that you think training camp will be the deciding factor for versus preseason performances? Yeah, can you get your feeling on the depth in the wide receiver room?
Well, we kind of talked a little about it that, you got the big three in Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Allen Robinson. Yeah. And I mentioned last week how excited I am about Allen Robinson and the leadership and everything that he's bringing to the equation. The Steelers could conceivably keep 5 receivers this year because I think they're going to go a lot of heavy packages and a lot more 2 and 3 tight end packages.
Yeah.
Because they have so much talent there. If they go 5, I believe Calvin Austin will be 1 because of that speed factor. They do not have that on offense anywhere else. And he's the kind of guy that can get you a splash play, a guy slip, a missed tackle, and he can put it in the end zone.
Yeah.
They don't have that. I actually think he's a better receiver than people realize. I think he has better contact balance. If you watch his film from college in Memphis, he would get a hit and he would bounce off, but he would be able to keep his feet and his momentum, and then he would run away from people. A lot of smaller guys, Dre Archer, Chris Rainey, guys in the past who were fast and small, they get hit and they just go over. Like Deontay Johnson, he takes contact, he goes right down.
Oh yeah. He's got a very small frame for his height.
Yeah, and he doesn't have contact balance. If you watch CA3, he's like a pinball a little bit. He'll get hit and he kind of bounces to the side. He knows how to deflect the full force of the blow and keep moving. So that comes down to my most interesting camp battle between Miles Boykin, who's the best gunner in the NFL. Wow. I mean, that guy gets down on punt returns. He's impossible to block. He's got great height, great speed, length. They can't block him. He beats the ball down there more than anybody in the NFL.
Yeah.
And there's great value in that. Now, last year he was an afterthought on offense. But I think
I found perplexing. Especially
he was crazy. When he was in the game, you knew it was a run. And if they did pass it, it was a rollout designed for somebody else, and he was just out there. They just never threw him the ball.
I mean, I think Boykin is one of those players. Even when he was at the Ravens, I remember when they first drafted him, and I thought a year learning NFL routes, he's gonna obliterate people. Like,
Yeah.
he must sit there every day, and it's the only way he's not gone stuff this and not cared anymore. He must think one day a team's gonna wake up to my potential.
But then you got Hakeem Butler, who
are you a fan of him? Because Mark's a fan. I'm not a fan. It's kind of
see. I was a huge fan when he was coming out of Iowa State because Ben on his wish list every year, he's like, I want a big receiver.
Yeah.
With the catch radius. And so I wanted Hakeem Butler, and that's the year they took Deontay Johnson. And I was very upset about it. But Hakeem Butler, then he didn't work out in Arizona because that was just that organization was all jacked up. Then he goes to Carolina, don't get any play, ends up in Philadelphia. They try to make him a tight end. He's not a tight end. But he's got tight end characteristics. But he just did not know how to use his catch radius and use his body to shield guys. And he found himself out of the NFL. Well, in the XFL this year, I started watching him, and I'm like, oh, man, he's shielding guys like a rebounder in basketball.
Right. Okay. So he has learned how to play.
He's getting guys on his back, using that wide frame, and then using that incredible reach. His arm wingspan is more than Broderick Jones. And Broderick Jones has a long wingspan.
Yeah.
The dude has an incredible catch radius. So he learned to take advantage. He's not doing it with just speed or trying to win contested catches like George Pickens. Now he's actually shielding guys, which could be invaluable on short yardage and goal line.
Yep.
So, I agree with Mark on that. I'm very excited about him because I'm thinking mismatches. I want weapons. I don't care what position they are.
Yeah.
But the Steelers have so many weapons when you count Freiermuth and Washington and Robertson, who's got size, Pickens. If Butler makes it too, even Boykin is 6'4".
Yep.
You put these guys on, who are you going to cover? 100%. And then you got a guy like CA3. You go big to cover this size. None of them's going to be able to hang with CA3.
Yeah.
So you could have massive mismatches. And, of course, I don't know why, but Connor Hayward is hard to cover.
He's. I'll tell you, it's funny. I played rugby with this guy, nicest guy in the world. He had a soft voice like Troy.
Mm-hmm.
He's literally the only one that I've ever seen like that was like Troy, and he was, what we were all in like at that point, starting over 6 foot, right? And he would have been about 5'6" or 5'8". I can't remember. He was a lot shorter than everyone else.
Yeah.
And we called him the Cannonball because he was so hard to tackle. No one could get low enough to tackle his legs. No one could knock him over. He pinballed off people like what you talked about with Calvin Austin. And it was it's the same image that you see with Connor Hayward against some of these bigger guys. It's just like, you just can't stop him. There's power, and it's not necessarily. A lot of people confuse speed with acceleration, right? Mm-hmm. There's a difference between being quick speed and being able to accelerate in space. And like Connor Hayward has that. That's why he's such a good seam runner. He can accelerate in space rather than that just burst of quickness in that pure raw speed. So yeah, I know it's funny with Connor Hayward, but you just love it. Like I love that sideline discussion last year in Atlanta where like you've got Cam and Tomlin, and Tomlin's just like, he's just a football player. Like, and that's why as long as Tomlin's the coach, he's on the roster. I think I said to Mark a while back, I'd love them to just, or maybe we even talked about last week. I can't remember. It was fairly recently. I feel like with Connor, they should just offer him like a 7-year deal that works for the team if he's not performing after 5 years. And like, just sign him up and just be like, you're a Swiss Army knife. We're signing you up. Special teams, blocking at fullback. You're catching the ball. You're doing these runs, and just go, you're here. Like, just finish do an 8-year career, finish it as a Steeler. Like, he's that sort of player. He's that sort of team guy. I know it's professional football. So like, that's a bit wishful thinking, but I kind of love that.
One thing about Connor is he knows how to adjust his speed. Anybody that's played organized sports of any kind,
Yes.
you're not running full speed, sprint speed all the time.
No.
Only a small percentage of the time. But what Connor will do is he'll get even with the guy, and he'll get that guy peeking back or whatever like that, and then he can accelerate, and they're not ready for it. And when they turn back around, he's done left them. He's done out in the open, and we see Pickett hit him 2 or 3 times last year on plays like that down the seams. And some guys just have that feel of when they need to run more full speed and when to set up their move. And as you said, the perfect thing, I'll say a lot of times, I'll say they're a professional football player. Well, that's what he is. He is just a football player.
Yeah.
And it runs in the family. It runs in their bloodline. And them guys just know how to play. And so I'm really excited. I think that one of the biggest jumps we're going to see out of anybody on this offense this year is going to be Connor Hayward.
Yeah, wow. Big. You touched on a point that in what we talked about last week, and particularly in the last part where we talked about wide receivers and moved into tight ends and fullback and Kenny Pickett. And it actually relates to Kenny Pickett last year, which is why I was so high on him over Malik Willis, which was passing down the center of the field, which the Steelers have not been good at for a very, very long time. Very long time. And Ben didn't want to throw there. And it is hard when you're not throwing play action. But you hit it there about the middle of the field in the seam, particularly because Kenny Pickett, when he came in, and PFF shows this best at a college level. Like, I don't love their raw data, but I don't mind looking at their grades and at least percentages. Like, you either hit a pass or you don't hit a pass. Like it's caught or it's dropped or it's whatever, right? He basically had his final year in college, and it was actually quite consistent in the average percentages, and they were all above 70% throughout his college career. But in his final year, he averaged like 90% plus in the middle of the field, basically. And the worst part was like deep, but it was still like in the 90s, which virtually no college quarterback that year had those numbers. So what excited me so much about Kenny Pickett is I was like, man, if they can get a line in front of him over the next few years, you've got someone who can throw this in the field. We're always throwing to the sideline. That gets risky because the sideline is always a defense's friend, 100%. So, although in the NFL they make it, anyone with the ball's friend as well, so you don't get hit or you can get timeout and stuff. But it is always more a defense's friend, and it's worried me and concerned me about just how much we rely on these big throws outside the hashes. Being able to grab these, toe tap drag kind of sort of stuff. You've got to then have really skillful playmakers at wide receiver, not just guys that know how to catch the football and in space and run and manage the schematics of the defense. You're asking a lot of your receivers, no matter whether they're tight ends, wide receivers, or a pass catching running back. So talk about Connor Hayward there. Is the same, and it relates to training camp because I'm keen to see this at training camp. Do you think we're going to see a lot more center field and seam throws this year than what we've seen last year, and certainly compared to what we've seen over the last, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, people don't understand. We talked a little bit about it last week about the congestion at a quarterback's feet.
Yes.
Allowing penetration up the middle. Well, you get a guy like Ben, as he gets older, more opportunity to be hurt, not wanting to take his eyes off of the defense. A lot of times he didn't trust the center of his line them last few years. Well, you said it very well when you mentioned all them sideline passes. You got to have a guy that's got a howitzer. He's got to hum that ball out there. And Ben can do it easily. That's not Kenny Pickett's specialty.
No.
And for him to do those passes, you watch, he has to get on top of the ball, has to have a clean pocket, step into those throws. So Kenny Pickett excelled in college, and I think he won the pros between the hash marks.
Yes.
And I think the Steelers realized that. That's one reason why their passing attack was so limited last year, and it was so anemic, and it was not creative at all because, one, they were still developing pass protection because Dotson was a weak link.
Yeah.
And then you had a quarterback in Kenny Pickett who had some limitations on some of the passes that was working the previous couple of seasons. And you didn't want to make a steady living of trying to hit them sideline throws, or you're going to get a pick six in there. So now I think you're going to see a lot more. One reason they brought in Darnell Washington and they've got Connor Hayward and they've got Keem Butler in camp is these guys who are large, who can work the center of the field, that can be in, and you don't know, are they going to be blocking or are they going to go out on play action? They strengthened the interior line, bringing in the best guard available in free agency, an all-pro guard, Isaac Samalu. They've strengthened because they're going to work at middle. They're going to run and pound the middle. As soon as you try to overcommit, that's when they're going to hit you over the top with the play action.
I was about to literally say, like, and I think that's the thing I find interesting is I think the creativity they can do now is you said it. The creativity wasn't there. That's the best way I've heard it summed up. And it's not just a Matt Canada thing. You know, you've got to play with the pieces on the board. But
exactly. Yeah.
But the creativity they can do out of like a single back set now is going to be incredible, because you're just, as you said, you're just not going to know whether those tight ends out there are there to catch the football, open up space for, you know, a slant or a drag route, or be blocking, of course, for the running back. So yeah, this is the thing I'm keen to see, definitely keen to see around that throwing down the center of the field. And you rightly said it too in terms of Kenny Pickett's arm. It's not that it's a weak arm. I think his short velocity is really, really good. But the thing that was frustrating me is that the teams that were actually being super successful in the league over the last few years going into last year's draft were teams that were throwing down the center of the field, and the Steelers were just going butt out, not doing it. And I did find it incredibly frustrating for all the criticism that Canada gets. That was something that's been there in the offense for a very, very long time. Now, yes, when your number one receiver is AB, who does need to go down the sideline, or you're doing these screen passes and all the rest of it, it does not make sense. But when you have Allen Robinson and Deontay Johnson, and you have the tight ends like they've got, and you've got a George Pickens, and you've got potentially a Boykin or a Hakeem Butler, and you've got a Connor Hayward, you can't afford not to throw it down the center. So to me, a lot of people will get into the success of Canada through the preseason and the season of how many points they scored. And Kenny Pickett only threw one touchdown or two touchdowns. He could have thrown four. To me, I'm like, not just how creative, but what's the spread of this offense look like? And are you doing things that are actually different for once that are going to be game changer? Because the other thing too is we talk a lot about, when we talk defense, and it's a good segue into the defense, we talk a lot about the safety position and being able to mark up on tight ends. Well, teams are going to have to be able to do that against us. Mm-hmm. But we've got to make that hard for them. We've got to make the choice they have to make. Are they playing a big nickel, or are they playing, more of like we're having a dime backer in there? Are they playing more of their traditional, whatever their base package is with a strong safety? Do they have someone that can mark up on them? When all the things on tape the last few years, are they getting ready to go out to the sidelines, and then the Steelers are going to hit them in the middle? We've got to the concern that we always have on defense, we've got to make a concern for opposing defenses. So that's why I think that center field, action, in the passing game, I think is particularly huge for me. And it's also, and I want to get your opinion on this, because it just sits in the back of my mind. I always allude to the fact that, I think Najee wasn't used well enough in the short passing game last year. And I think that's due to a mix of quarterbacks. I think it's due to the offensive line that they had. It's due to the injury that he had, that he played through with the metal plate in his boot for the first 6 weeks or whatever that was. I feel like, some of the short slant routes, getting him into the center of the field on some short passing, I feel like he could be devastating in there. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's something they could look to work in, or do you think they've got so many people that they don't even need to factor that in?
Well, I was looking at his statistics. I wrote an article how that it wasn't his fault that the Steelers put the cart before the horse. When they
yes, I've read that article.
They selected him in the first round, and meaning that Harris is a quality player and a fine young addition to the team, but You don't pick a running back when you do not have an NFL caliber offensive line.
Yep.
And especially in the first round. And so that was, it was a little bit of a humor in the article, but it was trying to make a point that it wasn't his fault that he's not averaged 4 yards a carry, because his first year he played behind arguably the worst offensive line in the NFL. And he was taking 2-yard losses and turning them into 2-yard gains just out of sheer effort, stiff arms, and high hurdles. And he caught a ton of balls that year.
Yeah.
From being a lot of them 2-3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and say, go get the first down, tried to get him out in space. And he overcome that and even made the Pro Bowl as a rookie. A lot of people forget that.
Yep.
Well, then last year he had that foot injury, and we all was like, what's going on? Because he don't look the same. Then he started to turn it on. So he was able to just get over 1,000 yards, which, it's a 17-game season now, so it don't mean the same. But still, you want to hit that line.
Yeah.
And his receptions and all were about in half. But let's look at why. It wasn't just because of the quarterback carousel, because the line started to gel last year.
Yeah.
But Jaylen Warren was the first real quality backup running back the Steelers have had since maybe D'Angelo Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, Jaylen Warren's is that good. And you want to get Warren out there on third down because he was one of the few guys on the Steelers that can make people miss and have an explosive play.
Yep.
And if you look at his carry, he almost averaged 5 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very good average on his receptions. And as we know, he blows people up in pass protection. Linebackers were slowing down, coming through the hole. Look at, because he's little, and they wouldn't see.
Well, he's one who I call him Cannonball now.
He's not Cannonball. Little. He's short. He's put together.
Sure, but I call him the Cannonball.
So when them guys would come in there blitzing, he'd knock them out, and they're like, "I don't want to do that again, Coach. Don't blitz me again." But Warren took a lot of carries, a lot of pass receptions away, which is actually good for Najee. His longevity, his usefulness, especially now that I feel like he should be healthy, not too wore out, and he's finally got the offense around him and the line in front of him for him to excel. So I agree with you totally. Get him the ball in space. He's going to stiff arm little guys away. He's going to run away from a lot of linebackers. He's just another mismatch. What we talked about earlier. The more weapons you can have, and Harrison and Warren are definitely weapons.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, I listen to a lot of defense stuff as well as, sports stuff. And there's this whole thing, and we've heard it with Ukraine and stuff, like the asymmetric warfare. I feel like that's what the Steelers going to be like this year. It's going to be asymmetric, right? They're going to hit you in ways you have no idea what's coming. It's going to be unconventional on what we've seen a lot in the league, and it's going to surprise some people. So I freaking love that. We talked a lot about Corey Trice last week, so I think the cornerback room is probably one I want to. I think we've sort of settled that. I think the interesting one is I want to talk about was outside linebacker. Probably is one of the few things we'll talk about further before we close that show. That the outside linebacker is quite interesting because of Marcus Golden and Nick Herbig, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's a good tussle and a good problem for the Steelers to have. But what do you think the exposure through like the training camp and preseason actual games, what do you think that looks like between Marcus Golden in terms of learning the way the Steelers do things? I know he's like a wily veteran, but, knowing the way the Steelers do things and getting Nick Herbig snaps where he can produce. And obviously it means we can pretty much rest TJ, which is great.
Yeah, I think you'll see TJ very limited, probably nothing in the first couple of games. Highsmith the same. Hopefully they already have a deal worked out, but then that would be optimal, even before camp or right at the early portion. Yeah. But Golden doesn't need a lot of reps. Golden is like, we're back to that word professional again.
Yeah.
To me, is a lot like Clark Higgins, who just passed away recently.
Mm.
Higgins was not a great athlete, but he had a great motor. He had a great attitude and always moving, always working. He got hustle sacks. He got sacks where he was just in the right place at the right time. He was that professional that you could count on. And to me, that's how Golden is. So I think you're going to see the young guys, Nick Herbig, get a lot of preseason reps. A guy like Quincy Roche get a lot of reps. David Perales out of Fresno State that a couple of people are saying has looked good in minicamp. Let them guys get that action. Let them get them reps and see. We pretty much know what we got in Nick Herbig. He's another guy who's all heart, got that great engine. He's constantly running like his hair's on fire.
Can I put it on you? Can I put it on you as well with Nick Herbig?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about him going inside, playing outside. And when he got drafted, I was like, just give him one thing to do in the first year. Don't do it.
That's what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ultimately see him being the versatile guy that does both, which is a bit more of something that 4-3 teams take advantage of? Or do you think he's going to be the outside guy, that he's going to be an outside guy only, or he's going to only, he's better, they would be better over time to transition him and let him become a really good inside guy that can still rush?
I think it'll come down to, he doesn't have great length.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we know James Harrison didn't have great length, but it didn't matter.
It's a bit of a different game now, though.
Well, but also Harrison was so strong.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. He would still jack you up and get underneath you and just lift you and throw you out of the way, which I don't expect Herbig to ever get to that level. But Herbig is, to me, it will depend on how effective he is as a rookie at dealing with length, with the tackles with the really long arms. Is he able to counter them? Yeah. I know he has the work ethic. I know he has the athleticism. If he can learn from Alex and from TJ and from Golden, because Golden has had 3 double-digit sack seasons, and he's not as fast or as athletic as Herbig is. So, some guys can overcome that. If it looks like Herbig can, I think they'll leave him at edge. If it looks like he's going to really struggle with length, I think that they may try to do, by next year, have him working on off ball more often.
Yeah. And I think that's another interesting wrinkle to the Steelers don't have a linebacker apart from Holcomb that can do the tough stuff, but can do the pass coverage as well. And I think because, they talk a lot about that with Herbig and sub package. And I want to bring that up as well, because in the live chat, Pittsburgh Toddy brought it up. And I mean, it's something that a lot of us know, but it's like, it kind of seems like sub packages have become the base defense. And I think it's funny when we talked about versatility before, it's going to be interesting on defense to see who takes a bulk of snaps in a particular schematic. Like, that's when I go back and look at this upcoming season, and it's going to be very interesting for me to see, well, what was the context of where they got a lot of their snaps? Was Herbig someone they use, let's say he plays 20% of the snaps on defense, in a base package, but then he's playing like 60% in sub package, and learn and seeing with some of these things, because I think that's going to come into play a lot as well. Is there any battles that you think are going to go on? Actually, no, I'll skip that safety. We talked about safety last week. Defensive line, shock to make it in your mind, and a shock to miss the team in your mind?
Well, I've been surprised that a lot of analysis and people that I've listened to are not as high on Armon Watts as I am.
Yeah. We talked about it last week.
To me, Watts is like, again, that word professional. And he just fulfills his assignments. He understands his role. He's been a starter. He's been a backup. He excels at both. He's just the perfect guy to have on that depth chart. And he could give you a little bit of tackle. To me, he's more of an end. I think, he would be Cam Hayward's primary backup. So I'm really high on him and Fahuku because I think Fahuku is that run stopper mentality, old school nose tackle, tie up blockers. Inside linebacker is going to love him. They're going to take him out to dinner. They're going to, because they realize he's going to make their jobs that much easier.
Yeah.
So I think they're upgrades over last year with Chris Wormley and, Martravius Adams. I think he may make the team, but I think he'll be in a depth role like he should be.
Yeah, I reckon they'll cut him for cap reasons. I reckon the $2 million he offers.
It's very well possible that could happen. My guy that I'm thinking is in serious trouble is Isaiah Loudermilk.
Oh, yeah.
Because Loudermilk did not progress. He come to camp, and I did not see any new pass rush. We knew he wasn't a pass rusher, but I thought he might have worked on it and at least developed his bull rush where he could help collapse the pocket. And he looked worse last year, in my opinion, than he did as a rookie. Now, that's not good.
I would agree with you on that 100%.
Yeah, so I think if there's a real guy in jeopardy of maybe not making the team, unless he comes in and really shows out at camp and the preseason, I'd say it's Loudermilk.
It's funny with Loudermilk too, because I don't think he knows how to play to his body, if you know what I mean. Like, I think you know what, he reminds me of, like, when you're a teenager and, people grow and you got to grow in, and I had this experience, you got to grow into your body and you're a little bit, I'm not saying he's uncoordinated, but I just sometimes look at him, I'm like, how do you not make the most of that size? And how do you not, like, for a guy of his height, he's so slow to get to the action in what should be like, what should take him 2 steps, I feel like takes him 5 steps, which is the difference between taking, like, 1.5 seconds versus taking 3 or 4 seconds. And 3 or 4 seconds, the ball's down the field and in the end zone. Like, so it's weird with him. When I saw why they drafted him and the Wisconsin D line and what they like to do there, I was thinking, like, this, I can kind of get this. This is an experiment. He's a big guy, all the rest of it. But, like, I've always found it odd with Loudermilk. I'm like, you've got everything to make it work. Marky T, he's from Perth, Australia. He's from the West. We call it the West. Oh, that's hilarious. I love that Steeler Nation in the house. Anything else you wanted to cover off that you think the Steeler fans should be thinking about or take notice of in training camp or the preseason games?
Well, one thing I was going to mention about Loudermilk is he's kind of built really funny, and that he's got a long torso, and he's actually taller than Hayward. But if you look at his arm length, it's like 33-inch arms. I mean, for a guy his height, his arms are really short. So I think it really affects him in his hand fighting and gaining leverage on the inside. Because he's usually at a disadvantage, even though he's taller than most tackles, but he's given up reach. So he's kind of, a special case there, which caused him to actually fall in the draft. And I think the Steelers thought they could get past it, that they could work with him on his technique and everything and have Cam work with him. And it hasn't worked out, thus far. The only other thing I'm really excited about is I'm wanting to see the kick return situation and who really is going to get a shot there. Yeah. Because we know the kickoff return now with the new rule, if you fair catch it, you get it at the 25. It's going to even – because last year teams knew the Steelers liked to fair catch in the end zone. So, like the Bengals, certain teams would kick it and have the Steelers field it around the 5.
Yeah.
Make them field the ball because they had struggled to get back to the 25.
Yeah.
Well, now you just go to fair catch it. Yeah. But you still got to have that punt return. And we know that the Steelers' main thing is ball security. So whoever's back there, they're going to –
That's why I think it'll be Connor. I think Connor will be catching it.
Well, that could happen. But I think that in a perfect world, Calvin Austin III will be able to return kicks. So I'm wanting to see what he looks like at camp and in preseason. The Steelers have 2 running backs who's going to be competing for running back 3 with Anthony McFarland.
Yeah.
And Darren Higgins and Graham.
Yeah,
I can't think of
Alfonso.
his first name.
Alfonso.
It ain't Antonio Graham, but
Alfonso.
anyway,
Alfonso.
both of them guys are. Graham's more of a Tariq Cohen type. He's more of a scat back, change of pace, really good cutback runner, elusive in space. So he looks like a punt returner. Whereas Higgins is stocky. He's around 6 foot. He has really good acceleration and power, but he's not as elusive as Graham is. So it wouldn't shock me if they don't. If the Steelers are not hoping that it's Calvin Austin III as primary kick returner, and that Graham sneaks into the roster as that running back 3 backup kick returner.
I love Graham. I'm keen to see him in training camp. I'm glad you brought him up that way because, and I think he could be the guy. You know how Steven Sims got the ball last year and people were like, wow, that guy can do some stuff, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Alfonso Graham's that guy in this year's roster. He's the guy people are going to go, oh, who is that? That's the. And before the rule change, I was interested in seeing what Jordan Bird, who they've brought in as that, I've listed him wide receiver, but really kickoff specialist or return specialist, even the way they've designated him on the roster. I was keen to see what he could do, but with the change in the kicking rule, I definitely like a bit more. I think his chance of making the team, I think he could make the practice squad, but his chances of making the team have definitely gone downhill because I felt like his benefit would have been in returning kickoffs rather than, the punts particularly in what they do. So yeah, kind of interesting.
I think that Bird was as you said, if he was just a kick return specialist for kickoffs and punts, before the rule change, he might have been looked at, but he was a running back at San Diego State.
Yeah.
And not a very good one.
No.
And he was much better on special teams. Well, now they've got him listed as a wide receiver, and that's a deep position, and he's not making the roster at wide receiver. No way. So, I think that kind of the handwriting's on the wall. Maybe practice squad and work with him and see what, as a project. But now I don't see him making the team this year for sure.
Yeah. And maybe they sit there because I think he's sort of roughly Calvin Austin build and height. Maybe they sit there and they go, we just have you on the practice squad learning how to be a understudy to Calvin Austin if Calvin's out for a couple of games and we don't want to ruin the schematics and we bring you up, right? And we elevate you from the practice squad once or twice, that sort of thing. Good play, kind of interesting place to close out the show. We talked a lot about big press last week, but I don't know, money where our mouth is big press the punter to start the season. Is he on the roster at the start of the Steelers season? Because I'm in the camp where I think it's more than likely it'll be Braden Mann.
Well, I think we might have mentioned it last week, but
yeah, we talked a lot about it. Yeah, but I'm just kind of keen how you're feeling about it. Yeah,
I am in no way a kick specialist at all, but the way he drops the ball before he kicks it is very inconsistent because he's kicking the tip. It seems like his margin for error is so small, and we see that he does shake the ball quite often. I'm like you. To me, I think we're going to see Mann take that position away just because they both got strong legs, but I think Mann's just a little more consistent.
Yeah, and I think, Mann. Yeah, I just think this makes sense. I think with Harvin, when he came in, there was like, what could he do on special teams and these big plays, and he had that big touchdown, at Georgia Tech and all that sort of thing, and it was just like, there's all this hype about things that probably weren't going to eventuate. Like it just sort of, it is what it is.
But he'll do well. All excited that Jordan Berry was gone.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Berry's an indoor kicker. I mean, he had a good year last year, but like not my favorite.
He did, but I don't know. He struggled with that weather in Pittsburgh. Yes,
I know. My favorite punter plays for the Seahawks, so it is what it is. Anything
what's
else
his
you wanted
name?
to? Michael Dixon.
Now he's from Australia, ain't he?
He's Australian. He
Yeah.
played for the Longhorns, the college team I support. And I actually, my college course, his sister was in my college course with me.
Mm.
So yeah, they were really, really good.
He's a good punter.
Well, he can do things with that ball. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Marky T, his favorite player, Christian Kuntz. As long as he's happy to keep him, there we go. Mark, you mean Landon Dickerson, the offensive lineman, or you mean Dicker the kicker who also played for the Longhorns? Anyway, anything else you wanted to discuss to wrap out the show? Have you got what articles have you got coming up on BTSC?
I don't have anything right now. We've started a new because we have this dead period between now and training camp.
Yeah.
So on the Steeler Hangover on Monday afternoon, we have started a series of podcasts where each week we're going to talk about the best ever Steeler.
Yeah, I watched the running back one.
At certain positions, and we started with running back. And basically it come down to Najee Harris and Jerome Bettis. But we're going to do the center position where the Steelers have had some incredible players. It's hard to figure out which positions. But we're going to finish it before training camp, and we're going to do Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger. Because that during my time at Behind the Steel Curtain, that has been the most controversial subject because you've got half
Can I ask you here? Are you in one firmly in one camp or the other?
Well, again, you have to watch the podcast to get the answer. But I will say this. I love and respect both players and all their accomplishments. But I do have one that I consider to be a substantial, clear winner. But that will be discussed on the podcast.
Yeah. I look, my opinion on that to close out the show, which is quite controversial. It's hard because, I mean, I used to would no point me deeply talking about it because of how much football's taken over my overall sports fandom. But I used to watch a lot of basketball as well, and a lot of people go, "Who's the greatest basketball?" And I'm like, it's different eras. It's like they're almost complete, like very, very different sports. Right?
You have to take that in consideration. Yeah.
Like there's when you're talking about like a Wilt Chamberlain, a Bob Cousy, Jerry West versus like Larry Bird and Kareem, like that. It's a whole different ballgame to what like a LeBron does now and a Steph Curry. It's just different. I think football, definitely different eras. I think there's not as many different eras, or eras. I can't say that one. And it feels weird to say it because I wasn't even alive when Bradshaw was in his heyday. And I love Ben, and I think he played in a time that Bradshaw might have struggled with. But I don't know. For me, I'm just saying, like, I think 4 Super Bowls, the gunslinger mentality that we're always in it, that I'd rather go out firing than, hold back my shots. I don't know. But then also I think Bradshaw had some talent around him that Ben didn't have at times with the salary cap, the way it is and the way it's shaped now. So yeah, that'll be an excellent show when you guys
I think each one, definitely tune in. And I think each one, there's like 5 criteria that you've got to use to make these decisions.
So you're using the 5 criteria for every position. Okay.
Yeah, you got to use, because you got to consider era, rules, changes, surrounding supporting cast, could Ben, what would Ben have done in Bradshaw's era and vice versa? See, you have to look at all this, and then you come up with a conclusion. And hopefully we'll put this debate to bed. I know it won't. There'll still be people it's going to like one or the other. We know this. But maybe when it's done after that show, I'll come back on and we can talk and then have
I'd love that. I would absolutely love
we
that.
can all talk about it.
And I'd love it as well. When you guys do pass rushes as well. I'm very interested to see, because particularly with this season where Cam Haywood could take the sack record and TJ will take it over, like, and the whole concept of a pass rusher in today's NFL as well, where interior pressure is so important, which is why Cam is so beneficial, why Aaron Donald is so good, right? Like, and the idea of pass rushing as a let's call it capability, right? Or an ability. And how you do that. I think that's it. I mean, it's an interesting discussion. Of course, you can separate interior versus outside, but it's these sorts of discussions. I love that you're doing this series, because it's these sort of discussions that Steeler fans, I think, we're so focused on when the next, and it's been a little while. We're all getting hungry for a Super Bowl. We're getting hungry for some success. But when you look back on it, we've all been very, very privileged. Like, imagine, like Mark absolutely hates the Bengals more than like anyone else. If you're a Bengals fan, you're not going back and watching numerous games from the 70s and going, this is awesome football. Like, you're not, because that's not a fun time for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, even, Kansas City, you're not going through, they were starved for basically almost 50 years of doing really anything in the NFL. You can't do that. Whereas as a Steel fan, you can go back and you can look at that and you can compare. And, like, I saw it came up on Instagram the other day. There was a whole like mini short 45-second thing on Greg Lloyd and how everyone underrates him and all the like this stuff. And they were going through like some of these. It had like a stat from a particular season and a stat line from a particular game, and you're like, man. And I remember I went in and Pro Football Reference and had a look at it again, and I was like, man, maybe we do really undervalue him, right? Like, and there are names, and I mean, I've been a Steel fan longer than I've been alive. You'd be able to go through them more than I can. Like, it's so, we're very lucky as Steel fans to have such a rich history that we can call upon, and we can compare guys that are killing it in today's era in a 17-game period to guys that were Hall of Famers that played only 14 games a season. It's just, it's pretty incredible. But with that, I've absolutely loved having you on the show again. We miss you, Mark. Good to get me back this coming week. But can't wait to have you on again soon, and we won't leave it as long as it's been so far. And everyone stay tuned to everything Shannon does with the Steel Curtain Network on YouTube, and definitely his articles on BTSC. Seriously, Google Shannon White, Google Steelers, Google BTSC, you'll find something there. And Shannon's articles hold up over time too. Sometimes I go back and pull something up when I've seen about a player a couple of weeks back. I'm like, I wonder what Shannon thought after he was drafted, and I pulled out that article. So, and that one on the cart before the horse is a very, very right narrative to be talking about. But with that, everyone, have a great July 4th weekend. Particularly, you might be listening to this on your Saturday, Sunday, Monday. As a Australian that has spent a bit of time in America, I've been to Philadelphia and done the whole Liberty Bell thing. I've been to your Capitol buildings. Pretty inspirational stuff. A lot of people have, it's massive what you're celebrating. So I had Shannon, how cool is this? I had July 4th one year in Texas in America on the river with mates, and we had these drinks there were these alcoholic slushies, and they were, I don't know how they did it, but they were literally red, white, and blue. Like, I've got this really cool photo lined up at this big bar as the fireworks go over, and we've got these like vodka slushies that have got this like red, white, and blue. It was awesome, and there's the meat smoking in the background. Oh, it was fantastic. So awesome on the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July to you, good sir, and hope you get some good time with family.
Well, thanks for having me on again. I had a blast. Always do. Thanks for the audience, and a happy 4th of July, everybody, and God bless.
That's it. No better way to close out the show.